Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining our November onX Hunt 101 Masterclass. We're going to give it just a few minutes to let everybody get situated and let folks get rolled in and logged in and all that good stuff. While we're waiting, a couple of housekeeping items. Your screens and your microphones are turned off, so no worries about if you have any noise in the background or anything. We can't see you, we can't hear you. This class is being recorded. So if you do have to duck out early or you want to review something, anything like that, it'll be up on the onX Hunt YouTube channel. Hopefully tomorrow morning, just kind of depends how fast YouTube can process it and everything. And we will also email everybody a link to that video tomorrow if you're unable to find it on the YouTube channel. If you do have any questions for us that you'd like us to answer during the class, please put them in the Q&A box down below. You have two options down there to kind of communicate. There's a chat box. That's great for just chiming in, saying, hey, you know, it's Jack from Michigan tuning in, something like that. The Q&A is a lot easier for us to keep track of. We have someone from our customer support team answering questions there and sending some to us if they're ones that would be good to answer live on the air. And we'll also be doing a giveaway at the end of the class. We're giving away some of our new onX hats, so make sure you stick around to enter that giveaway. And with that, I guess we'll get going. First up, my name's Jack. I'm going to be kind of leading the spiel here. I'm joined by Connor, who's an esteemed member of our customer support team. He's very talkative, as you can see. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen here. We'll kind of go over what we're going to talk about today, and then we will get into it. Just one moment here. So kind of an agenda for the evening. We're going to talk about the different membership options you have with onX. And then we're going to get into some of the different features within the app using the location button, the compass, map layers, offline maps, tools, waypoints, different imagery options, things like that. We'll save some time at the end for some Q&A. And then, of course, the giveaway there at the end. We're going to try to keep this to about an hour, hour and a half tonight. It's a lot of information, so we will kind of go through it a little fast. If you do have questions, again, put them in the Q&A there. If you want us to explain something in a little more depth or something, let us know, and we'll do our best to cover that. We won't be able to hit every aspect of the app. This is a 101, so there are some things that are a little bit more advanced we won't quite touch on today. If you do have questions on those, our FAQs on our website and our help center are excellent resources for you there. So to start off, let's talk about your membership options. We've really got kind of 4 different membership levels that you can be at in the onX Hunt app. I'm struggling for words today. The basic membership is what you have when your membership, like if you start a trial membership and you don't purchase a paid membership, you go to a basic level, or if you have a membership that expires or something like that. The basic is a pretty bare bones access to the Hunt app. You're able to see the imagery, you're able to see the location, you're able to use a limited number of waypoints. I think you're allowed to say 1 offline map. Is that correct? Yep. So it's fairly limited. You're not able to see any of the land ownership information or any of the more detailed information there with a basic membership. If you decide to purchase a membership, you've got a couple of different options. The first is our premium membership, and there's really 2 different levels to that. We have our single state premium and we have our premium 2-state membership. So those give you, like the name implies, access to the layers for 1 state, or with the 2-state, you get 2 states. So there you're able to see land ownership, property information, public and private for 1 state or 2 states, depending on what level you have. You have unlimited offline maps. You're able to mark as many waypoints. I believe the limit's 2,500 markups, or did that get raised recently?
It might be 3,000.
Might be 3,000. I should know this off the top of my head. We're always updating things. So, I've been using onX for 6 years, and I'm not near the 3,000 marks. That's quite a large number of markups there. And you also get full access to our nationwide layers, which we'll get into in the future, but things like timber cuts, things like wildfires, drought monitor, things like that. You do get access to those nationwide ones. The elite membership gives you access to all 50 states plus Canada. So you get land ownership information, all 50 states. Canada is a relatively new endeavor for us. So we do have land ownership information in some provinces and territories, not all of them. We're constantly working to get more data north of the border there for our friends up there. So it is a bit more limited, but we do have the Crown land and we have different outfitting and guide areas for the provinces and territories where that applies. You also get access to elite benefits with an elite membership. So that ranges from discounts on gear that we use, things like Vortex optics, lacrosse boots. What else am I forgetting? Gerber gear is on there, Lone Wolf custom gear, all kinds of different discounts on products. You also get access to free services. Some of them are educational type services like the Hunting Public's Deer School. You get access to some of the modules on that and a discount on the full course. Same thing with the Upland Institute dog training, the Elk Collective, more elk hunting education. And you do get free access to services like Hunt and Fool and Top Rut. Application season is, well, it's basically already here. Idaho tags go on sale the 1st. So we're getting into the thick of application season. Alaska's coming up December 15th, and then we'll be into Wyoming and Arizona and everyone else after the 1st of the year. So if you're a person that is applying for deer, elk, antelope tags, etc., in the western states, Hunt and Fool and Top Rut are great services that you get with the elite membership. What am I forgetting on that?
Probably just recent imagery. So have another imagery set, and I think we'll cover this probably a little bit later.
Yes.
But for our elite customers, we have a medium or lower resolution imagery that's updated every 2 weeks. So if you are looking for like super quick idea of what ground conditions are like, it can be a really useful tool for that. I've been using it a ton duck hunting this fall.
I was just looking at it today because I'm about ready to really get into my duck season here. So
It's about that time.
how's it been?
Oh, it's been good. That cold front that came through was amazing.
I was thinking about that and I was mad I wasn't in town.
It was well worth it.
All right. So let's get into the app here. I'm going to share on an iPad that I have off to the side here so that you can kind of see, you can kind of follow along if you have a mobile device nearby you. Just give me one moment to pull that up here. There's a bit of a lag through Zoom from my iPad. There we are. So this is the onX Hunt app. It'll look pretty much the same whether you're on a phone or a tablet like I am here. When I pull up the map, I can see my blue dot in the center here. That's how I know where I am at any given time, is that blue dot on the map. If you pull up the map and if you're not seeing your blue dot there, it looks something like this, right? There's nothing to indicate where you are. In the lower right-hand corner, there is a button that looks kind of like a crosshair. Some people say it looks like a wagon wheel. If you click that, you see it turned blue and the map moved to my location. So that's how you're able, no matter where the map is in the world, you tap that button, it's going to center on your location. If you tap it and you get some, sort of message that says location services not enabled or permission needed or something along those lines, that means you just haven't granted onX permission to access your location. You just need to go into your phone settings and enable that permission so that we're able to interact with the GPS receiver within your device so that we can show your location on there. If I click that button one more time, you can see it changes and now it looks a bit like an arrow. And you see from my blue dot, there's what we call like a sight cone, or some people say it looks kind of like a flashlight coming off of their dot. That is going to point whatever direction the phone is pointed towards. So this would be a way where you can, I'll show you here as I'm moving my iPad around, you see the map is moving as well. So this is super handy for if you're, going down a road, you're going down a trail, and you want to see what's ahead of you. You want to see what's on your right, what's on your left. Instead of having the map oriented north all the time, this will orient whatever direction you're facing will be up on the map. So that's a question we get from folks quite often. It's a feature not a ton of people know about. I use it all the time when I'm out in the field so that I'm able to see, if I'm going along a trail and I need to know which fork I need to take. It's a lot easier to do that than to, kind of work it around in your mind to decide whether you need to go right or left or whatever. If I want to go back to north being up, I can just tap that button again and I go back to my normal orientation there. Another kind of new feature for this year, it was released, I think, late this summer, early this fall. New for this hunting season is our kind of updated compass mode, or expanded compass mode is probably a better term for it. If I go back, I'll show you how I got there. So I'm in this heads up mode. I've got the arrow in the lower right-hand corner. If I go up, you see there's a button there that looks like a compass. If I tap that, it brings me into that expanded compass mode. At the top, you see I have a compass bearing, or where I can take a bearing. It's got the degrees there. And you see this kind of almost gridded line extending out from my location dot. So what that allows you to do is I can then tap the button in the lower right-hand corner that looks like a rangefinder. Once I tap that, you can see the bottom portion of that line has turned red or orange, depending on how you look at that. Is that red or orange?
I'm gonna go with red.
Okay. My eye sees it as orange. Everybody else tells me it's red. Anyway, what this allows me to do is I can orient my phone. I can point it in whatever direction I need to. And then I can easily do a couple of things here. I can easily measure how far away something is. If I either don't have a rangefinder or it's too far from my rangefinder. Personally, my rangefinder kind of goes out after 450, 500 yards, unless it's like the side of a building or something, which isn't very useful when I'm out in the field hunting. So what I can do is I can just tap on that line, and I'm just dragging my finger up and down right now. And of course, we're in town here. It's not super realistic to a hunting scenario, but we'll do the best we can. If I'm looking, let's say I see an elk in a clearing and I put my rangefinder on it and it's too far. My rangefinder is not picking up that elk in that clearing. I can look at the imagery on my phone, find that clearing, and then I can just drag this dot. Let's just pretend, obviously, we're in town here. Let's just pretend that's where it is. Put that dot there. I can tap this waypoint button on the left-hand side, and I can put a waypoint there, and I know it's 662 yards away. That's farther than I'm going to shoot, right? You may have the equipment and the training to do that. Great, go ahead. I personally do not. So I'm going to need to get closer. But I can save this waypoint here. And then now I have a landmark on my phone where I have something that I can use when I'm planning a stock so that I can get closer. I know, hey, it's 660. I'd like to be 400 and in. I need to, take off 260 yards or so. That's one way to do that. Just this past week, I was out deer hunting. I ranged a deer. It was at 270 yards. So my rangefinder worked. So what I did was I used the rangefinder tool. I pointed my phone in the direction of the deer. It was bedded down. I was waiting for a shot. I had to lay there for like an hour and 15 minutes before the deer finally stood up. So I had plenty of time to do this. I pointed my phone at the deer. I hit 270. I hit a waypoint. That way, after the shot, I had a spot to start blood trailing from because I had to climb down this coulee and climb back up. Everything looks a little bit different when you're over there. It's a super handy way to be able to mark where an animal was standing when you shot. Earlier example, I could mark where an animal was standing for a stock. There's all kinds of applications for this. What's something I'm forgetting?
That's pretty much all I've used it for, so I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, so it's use it for whatever is useful for you. My favorite is, of course, my favorite is when I'm able to shoot a deer. But it's super nice for marking that waypoint on that spot so that you have a spot to start blood trailing from. And then if I want to close out of this feature, I tap that exit button and I go back, and you can see I still have those two waypoints listed there or showing on my map for future reference. If you don't want them, you can always delete them. We'll show you how to do that in a little bit. All right. Let's get back to my location here. I'm going to get into our base map options right now. So what we're looking at right now is a satellite image of the town of Missoula, where onX's headquarters is located. I'm going to move out to a more mountainous area outside of town here. You can see as I zoom in, you're able to see the trees, you're able to see the areas where it's more clear, where there's grassy areas. I can see some down logs, all that good stuff. But I'm not really able to tell the terrain very well. If I want to see elevation change and the topography there, in the lower right-hand corner above your location button, I'm going to tap on our base map selector. Right now, it might be a little small on your screen, but it says SAT in 2D. If I tap there, it's going to bring up this menu that allows me to choose between our 3 main base maps. So if I want to see the topography of the area, I'm just going to tap that furthest right button that says Topo. You can see the map has changed. It looks like your classic, if you ever use the old USGS maps, a paper topo map is what this looks like. So you can see those contour lines. You can see a little bit of aspect shading so that you can tell, north from south and things like that. So that's an option for you there if you're really looking for, like right here, I can see in between these 2 peaks, this saddle here. I'm able to highlight benchy areas or finger ridges, things like that. People know that elk like to bed on those benches on the north side during September archery season. That's what I use the topo for. I use it for in the spring when I'm looking for spring bear spots, look for those southern aspects, look for likely areas where a bear might be feeding on fresh grass. What I use most of the time, however, I would say probably 90% of the time when I'm out in the field, it's probably 99% of the time, is I use the hybrid map. This is the best of both worlds. It gives me the imagery as well as those topographic lines. So as I zoom out here, I can see the terrain, I can see the vegetation still pretty good. It does get a little bit obscured with those lines. So if you're really trying to focus just on vegetation in an area, flip over to satellite. Most of the time, I want to be able to see both at a quick glance. So I turn on that hybrid mode there. A couple of newer options we have are leaf off imagery and recent imagery. Now, these are only for elite members. So you do have to have that elite membership to have access to these. I'm going to go down to my recent imagery button here. All I did was tap that slider. You see it's green now. And you can see my imagery is a little bit blurrier. So this recent imagery is taken every 2 weeks. And because it is higher frequency, it's lower resolution. So it's designed not to be a standalone imagery option, but it's designed to be in addition to our regular imagery and topographic information. It's just another tool to help you in your scouting and in your hunting. What's super cool is, this time of year, I'm able to see where the snow line is. I'm able to see if lakes are frozen over or if little potholes when I'm duck hunting, if they have ice on them. Earlier in the year, I was using this when I was pheasant hunting to see when the crops had been taken out. And you can go back through time with these. I can see right now that imagery was taken, if I look in the lower left-hand corner, sometime between November 12th and 26th. I can go back in 2-week increments. So I just went back a little bit there. You can see we've actually lost some snow if I toggle between the 2 of these. We had a pretty big snowstorm. When was that? 3rd week of October or so?
Yeah,
I think we had out here. So there's all that snow there. If I go back 2 more weeks, there's no snow. So what's cool is you can go back to, I believe it's March or April was when we rolled this out. So we have all the imagery dating back to then. So as the months and years go on, we're building a bigger and bigger library of this historic imagery. So you'll be able to go back, as far as we have imagery to check on different seasonal changes in different areas. So that's a newer feature I think is super sweet. I'm going to be using the heck out of this in the spring for spring bear hunting. That's really one of my favorite hunts that I do every year. But the hard part is if I'm traveling a couple hours away from Missoula, I don't necessarily know what the snow levels are going to be like in a given area. I can turn on recent imagery. And yeah, it might be a couple weeks old, but it gives me a good idea of, if it's clear, then I'll know like, hey, I'm good to go for sure. If there's still a ton of snow there at the elevation that I want to be at, I know I probably got to wait a little bit longer. To turn that off, all you do is go back into your base map selector, hit that button, and turn it off. Another new option we rolled out this fall is leaf off imagery. So if I turn that on, here in Montana, you can see my map says no leaf off imagery available. We have this for 13 states, I believe it is.
I think right now we do.
And they're pretty much all, or not pretty much, I think they are all east of the Mississippi, east of the Great Plains. I know Wisconsin, you can see here, we don't have it for Minnesota, we have it for Wisconsin. So if I zoom in on Wisconsin, zoom in on an area here, I can see these are all trees that have dropped their leaves. If I toggle this off and on, pretty stark difference there. So this is nice for, sometimes you can see where deer trails are on this imagery. A lot of people like to use it. You can easily tell if you're in an area, see if I can find one here. If you're in an area where there's a mix of, say, hardwoods and evergreen trees, if you got a bunch of pine or spruce or something, you can easily tell at a glance where those are, because obviously the evergreen trees are still going to have their needles on them, and the deciduous trees are going to be dropping their leaves. You can kind of see it here. There's a stand of probably pine trees or something there. Looks like it might even be a plantation. Looks like they're in pretty straight lines. And then if I go over the other side of the road, evergreen trees. Actually, that looks more grassland. Either way, you get the point. Anything I'm forgetting on those two imagery options?
Well, that's pretty much it for those two. I hope to add more states for the leaf off imagery, but
Yep.
just depends who has it available. So hopefully we'll get some more as we get further into the future.
Yeah, if we don't have your state in leaf off imagery right now, don't worry. We're going to try to add as many states as we possibly can. Some states have that option available, some don't. It's just depends on who's got it available. We'll try to get it. If they don't have it, we're going to have to wait until they have it available.
One other thing I forgot as well, those two imagery sets are only available online at this time. So if you're out and don't have cell service, those won't be accessible, though you will still be able to use just our normal base imagery.
Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing right now. I'm going to go over to the onX web map on the computer, show you what that looks like. So with your onX membership, whether you're basic, premium, elite, you could access onX on a mobile device, like your phone or tablet, like most people do most of the time. One thing a lot of people still don't know about is our web map on the computer. So give me one moment to pull that up. And again, this comes with your membership. You just need to log in with the same email address and password that you use when you set up your account. So let me share my screen here and pull that up. So to get here, you go to onxmaps.com, upper right-hand corner, there's login button. You put in your information, you pull up a map like this. Now this should look similar to what you see on your mobile device. It's going to be the same imagery. Any waypoints that you mark on your mobile device will show up on your computer and vice versa. So I'm just going to pull this one up, so that you can kind of follow along with my cursor here. It's a little harder on the mobile device. But I'm going to show you some of our different layer options here. Now, this is really the kind of the bread and butter of onX is our layers. And this is also one of those kind of things that people sometimes get confused on. So we're going to try to alleviate some of the confusion here. So if I open up my map layers on your phone, if you're following along on a mobile device, it's in the lower left-hand corner, says Hunt Map Layers. Should look very similar to this right here. Your map layers are broken up into folders. Now, this is where a lot of the confusion comes. You have different folders or different collections of layers. If you have a premium one-state membership, you're going to see one state listed here. Two-state membership, you have two states like I have listed. If you have an elite membership, could be anywhere basically from 1 to 50, or I guess 51 if you have Canada turned on as well. In addition to those state folders, we also have some nationwide folders, things like current conditions, land and access, road trails and rec, trees, crops and cover, wildlife layers. Now, whether you're premium or elite, you have access to all of those nationwide folders. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but one of the common questions we get all the time is, hey, I'm looking in Montana and I'm not seeing the wildfires layer. Why can't I turn on wildfires? It's because that's a nationwide layer and it's not in the Montana folder, even though Montana has wildfires. It's going to be in the current conditions layer folder. So that's just, I wanted to mention that right from the outset. If you're looking for a specific layer, it may not be in your state folder. You may have to go to one of these nationwide folders.
One thing I have to add here too, we often hear a lot where when people go into this, or even if they're looking at their map and your layers aren't showing up for the state your account's set for, if you go into the hunt map layers and you don't see it listed at the top, it's likely just because your state's not turned on. Even for a premium 1 state or 2 state, you can turn those states off. So you just want to run back down on that list. It's a list of all 50 states and Canada. And if you click that slider next to your state, that'll turn it back on, get those layers running again for you.
So what Connor was talking about there, if you look at right now, I've turned off all of my states. There's no state listed here. All I have to do, since I'm in Montana, I scroll down, hit the Montana button and turn it on. So if you're an elite member, that's another thing we hear from elite folks is, hey, I paid for all 50 states. Why am I not seeing them on there? You don't want them all turned on at once. It's a lot of data and it can slow the app down, especially on a mobile device. It can slow it down a little bit. I almost never have more than 2 states turned on. You know, I can only hunt 1 state at a time. I guess I could hunt the border of a state and move back and forth. But I'll have, you know, I hunt Montana. The last couple of years, I've hunted Montana, South Dakota, and Minnesota, kind of the 3 states that I'm lucky enough to be able to hunt. So I might have those 3 turned on. Right now, you know, my South Dakota and Minnesota trips are behind me. I'm just going to have Montana turned on. You can see it's up here at the top. By default, 3 layers are going to be turned on for your state with a few exceptions. Most states, you're going to have the private lands, the government lands, and the hunting districts layers turned on by default. Your hunting districts, it might be called something else. It might be hunt areas, it might be GMUs, it might be deer permit areas, whatever your state calls them. In Montana, they're called hunting districts. Those 3 are going to be turned on. If you're looking at your map and you're not seeing, if I zoom in here, if you're not seeing some of this private land information, which is these orange or red boundary boxes and landowner names, it's because the private lands layer is turned off. You just got to go in and turn that on. Likewise, if I zoom out here, if you're not seeing some of these colored filters on the map, that's your government lands layer. So you can see when I toggle that on and off, how much that changes the map there. A couple other layers I almost always turn on are the possible access. Now that layer is going to show you private land that may be open to public access. So these are lands that are typically like timber company lands, like Weyerhaeuser Timber, big companies like that. It could be the Nature Conservancy. It could be in Missoula, we have the 5 Valleys Land Trust has some land, different conservation organizations or land trust groups like that, that may allow access. That's why we labeled it possible access. It's not a guarantee. It's not a, yep, go ahead and do whatever you want. It's showing you this is a parcel that may allow you to hunt, fish, camp, hike, etc. You do have to do your homework. You do have to check, you know, if it's Weyerhaeuser Timber, for example, you may have to check with them and see if it's open to your chosen activity, if there are certain rules that they have, if it's, you know, if they charge a fee for access, things like that. But it is a pretty handy tool to show you land that you may not otherwise know, you know, is open to you. Another layer I turn on is our block management layer. Your state may have something similar to this. It may not. Block management is Montana's private land access program. So this is, again, private land, but the landowner is enrolled in the block management program and they allow public access for hunting on their land. In Montana, you typically have a sign-in box where you put down some of your information, your vehicle information, your address, things like that. And then that's your permission to hunt that area for the day, or sometimes you can get permission for a couple days at a time, things like that. Every state calls this something different. In North Dakota, it's plots. In Kansas, walk-in hunter access. Some states, it's just walk-in access. Iowa is IHAP. Bunch of different states have this. I think there's like 30 some different states have a program like this. Not everybody does. Your state might not have a corollary layer, but again, that's something that's super handy. I'm just going to move up to one here to show you what this layer looks like. So this is a block management area. You can see these private lands have a black boundary around them with red dots. Might be a little tough to see on your end there, but there are some red dots showing that. If I click on the map, I get more information about that area. That's something we should have mentioned earlier. If you're ever wondering what something is on the map, if it's a coloration for government lands, you don't know what kind of land it is, if it's a trail, if it's a recreation point, if it's a block management area or a walk-in area, click on the map or tap on it on your phone or tablet. It's going to give you this, we call it a query card here for when you query the map. Private lands gives me the landowner's name, their tax address. That is going to be where they get their taxes, typically where their mail is sent, right? Because it may not be that particular parcel, especially when we're talking about agricultural land. So that's handy if you want to contact somebody to inquire about permission. Let's say it's not enrolled in a walk-in access program, and you just want to call them and say, hey, is it all right if I go deer hunting on your land? You have name, you have an address. You can try to look them up in the phone book. You could send them a letter. You have their mailing address there. You have their name. You can contact them that way. If I scroll down, I see the information for this block management area. If I want to find more information, I can click on this more info. Will tell me about the block management program in general. This area info will take me to the state of Montana website that lists out the rules and regulations for this particular block management area. So that's something that's super important to do. Some areas are closed on certain days of the week. Some limit the amount of hunters in a given day. So make sure you click on that to find out more information. Going back into our layers, one more I wanted to touch on in the state folder here real quickly is this hunting districts layer. You see there's an icon here that shows kind of some layers stacked up and says 16. These are sub layers where in Montana we have different hunting districts for different game animals. By default, my deer and elk hunt district layer is selected. Each state's going to be a little bit different, but we try to select the species that is kind of most commonly hunted. Most states is going to default to deer zones or deer districts. If I'm hunting antelope, let me zoom out so you can see here. These green boxes or green polygons with the letters or numbers in them are our hunting districts. When I click on antelope, you see they change. You see there's not very many in the western part of the state here because there aren't any antelope over here. If I go to bighorn sheep, bison, black bear, they all change. Wyoming seems to be the most common state we hear about, I think, especially when it comes to application season and then hunting openers. Wyoming, I believe it's mule deer is selected by default. We often hear from people, hey, I'm going antelope hunting and your numbers don't match Wyoming game and fish. You just got to go into your districts there, or I believe in Wyoming, their hunt areas, and select the species that you want to hunt. If something's not looking right, double check that sub layer and make sure you've got the correct one selected there. Anything I'm forgetting on that?
I think we're pretty much good for state specific.
Awesome. So again, your state folder is going to look different than Montana. Some states have different rules, different programs, different data available. In some states, we have some timber harvest layers. Pennsylvania and Minnesota are two that come to mind, where the DNR has data available to show logging on state and private lands. When available, we grab that data. If it's not available, if the Michigan DNR, for example, doesn't have that data available, we're not able to show it. We grab it for states when we can. So Minnesota and Pennsylvania are two that come to mind. I'm kind of blanking on other state-specific ones that we have, but each one's going to be a little bit different.
big one. If anybody's from North Dakota, the e-posted lands are on
Yes.
there as well. That's
Good.
definitely a huge one for hunting there.
Yep, if you're in North Dakota, I'll show you right now. We've got the electronically posted land, so you can turn that on. That's on by default, actually, in North Dakota. So you can, if I zoom in, all of those red areas are the electronically posted lands where you're not allowed to hunt there. Good call out there. All right, let's get back to Montana. We'll go through some of these nationwide folders here. The first one is the current conditions. Now, these are layers I typically don't have turned on at all times. I think of them, I mean, a lot of these folders, not just the current conditions, a lot of times I use them more for scouting than I do for actually when I'm out hunting. One that I do typically have turned on all the time is the active wildfire layer. This is one we hear about a lot, you know, more in the summer and early fall during fire season. We're kind of out of it right now, thankfully. Let me see if I can find an example. Here are some where you see these fire icons here. This is what this layer is going to look like, especially if you're zoomed out. These are all prescribed burns right now. So if I zoom in on one, you can see this one has RX behind it. Means it's a prescription, it's prescribed to burn. If I click on the icon, I get more information about it. So this gives me the name of the fire. It'll show me when we last checked our data source. So we check our data source multiple times a day to provide the most updated information. It'll also tell you when the source last updated. So oftentimes these two dates will be different. There are sometimes where, you know, this should pretty much always be today's date, unless you're checking it at like 12:01 a.m. or, you know, the first couple hours of the morning before we run that check again. Should be today's date. The source updated, it's going to show you when they last updated the information, whether it's, you know, the Forest Service that's responding to that fire or your state or whoever. They may not update that every day. It might be a week off. At least you know this is what it was a week ago. It may have changed, but we check it, you know, multiple times a day. And if it's not a prescribed fire and it's a larger fire, you'll see a perimeter. You'll see a polygon around this icon that'll show you the perimeter of that fire. For prescribed burns, we don't have that. I don't think that's something that's typically reported on because it's not an out of control fire. For ones that are not like fully contained, right, they're going to show you that perimeter so you can see the extent of that fire. A couple other ones you can turn on in there. Again, these are ones that I don't use all that often unless I'm scouting for a specific thing, but I can turn on the drought data, you know, when I'm looking at applying for tags, especially in the Southwest where antler growth is largely dependent on how much rainfall they get. I might take a look at this and say, oh, I don't want to go into this area in New Mexico with exceptional drought maybe. I can just quickly see at a glance what the drought looks like. We did have a question somebody sent in and said that they had blue and green boxes all over their map that were obscuring it. If that was you, I think it is the precipitation radar layer. So if I zoom in here, I wasn't expecting all those trails to be showing, but you can see that bluish coloration here showing that radar. Turn that off, it clears it up. And that highlights a bigger thing. If you're ever looking at the map and you're like, man, I don't want to see this. I just want a clear image of the map. You don't know what something is. A, if you click on it, a lot of times that'll tell you what that is. But B, go into your layers and see what you have turned on. 9 times out of 10, when somebody's like, man, I got this goofy coloration on my map. I don't know what it is. I don't want to see it. They accidentally turned a layer on or maybe had turned it on months before and now they're coming back to the map and don't remember what they had turned on. So go through your folders there. And each one of these will tell you how many layers are turned on in a given collection. So if you see, you know, oh man, I got 7 layers turned on in current conditions, that's going to obscure your map quite a bit. So go in and turn those off. That'll clear things up for you. Going down to our land and access folder, there's a few layers in here I have turned on at all times. Wilderness areas should be turned on by default. That's going to be your federally designated wilderness. Like if I go up to the Bob Marshall Wilderness here, you see this kind of gray coloration with some hash marking in there, showing you those federally designated, non-motorized wilderness areas. If you don't want that on, turn it off, like any layer. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service hunt areas, that is going to be for, typically think about like waterfowl refuges, wildlife refuges. Here's an example of that. There's a refuge south of Missoula here. If I turn this layer off, it's still public land, so I still see this green coloration. I know it's a refuge, but refuges typically have, I don't know if strict is the word for it, but they have specialized regulations if they allow hunting, which many of them do. So if I turn this on, I can see it's broken up into a few different hunt units. I can see there's an area here right in the middle where no hunting is allowed. If I go up to the north a little bit, this is an archery unit. If I go down to the south here, this is a waterfowl unit. You ever waterfowl hunted down there?
I haven't.
I have not either. I'd like to try it sometime.
It's worth checking out.
Yeah. So again, if you're wondering what all this information means, if you say, oh, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service hunt unit waterfowl, well, what does that mean? Click on the map, scroll down. I see it's a Lee Metcalf Wildlife Refuge. And I go to this more info button. I'm not going to click it right now because it'll take us out of the map, but that'll take you to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's website. It'll give you the specific regulations for this particular refuge. Okay, so some of them, again, they only allow hunting on certain days of the week sometimes, or they have, hey, this is, I believe this one, it's waterfowl hunting every day except for, I think it's Mondays and Wednesdays. There's a couple days of the week where it's open for archery whitetail hunting and not waterfowl hunting. So again, just like the possible access layer, make sure you're doing your homework and make sure you're abiding by all the rules and regulations there. But that's another handy layer for you. If I scroll down, we've got a bunch of other layers in there. A couple of cool ones are the RMEF, PF and QF and DU layers. These are showing, like right here, you can see this Ducks Unlimited Conservation Project. These are basically showing where those 3-4 conservation organizations have done habitat work, have opened up public access. So here it's just telling us this is a habitat restoration and enhancement area where they've done some work to improve habitat for waterfowl species. Let me find an RMEF one here for you. So here's an area where the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has done some work. A lot of these are going to be areas where they have opened up access or gotten an easement or things like that. There's some pheasants. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. I'm gonna take a drink of water. There's a Pheasants Forever layer, shows a similar thing there. So those are kind of cool. So you can see, especially if you're a member of those organizations, to see where your money's being put to work on the ground. Last one I want to show here is the slope angle. So this one's pretty cool. As I zoom in, you can see it almost looks like a heat map. Now this is going to show you the real steep areas in kind of purple going to red. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, it'll give you kind of a key showing you how steep these areas are, going down to the green being not so steep. And if it's regular imagery, it's pretty flat area. Classic example of this in the Mountain West is looking for elk bedding areas. We know elk don't want to bed on super steep terrain. So you can use this to find those flatter areas, find those green and uncolored areas to try to find some of those spots. You can also use this to find spots where, hey, I'm probably not hiking up this. This looks pretty steep here, to maybe try to avoid those areas, things like that. Again, this is one that I turn on when I'm scouting. I don't want this on all the time because you can see it kind of obscures my map. That's one I turn on and off when I'm looking at a new area potentially. All right, moving on. Roads, trails, and rec. Now, these are some layers, especially this motorized roads and trail layer. A lot of people don't know that we have, but I use them all the time. I zoom out here. You can see I have a bunch of kind of squiggly lines on my map. Those are going to be your trails. So this is a hiking area outside of town here, pretty popular area for hiking, not so much for hunting, but kind of illustrates what this layer looks like. If yours isn't looking like this, if it looks more like this. Because the two layers that are turned on by default are trails and recreation sites. I turn on the slope. You can see that coloration changed. If I get over to a more steep area, I can highlight better what this looks like. So it's again kind of like the slope angle. It's color coded. This green trail, not very steep. This red trail, pretty steep. So you can kind of take a look and see what that trail, what the elevation change is going to be, how steep it is. You can also turn on the mileages to see how far it is between any two given points. Of course, I can always click on a trail to get more information about it. This is the M Trail, pretty well known, well-hiked trail right by the University of Montana campus here, 0.7 miles. Some good information there. And then for me, my most used layer out of here is motorized roads and trails. Now these are going to show, just like the name says, motorized trails. Typically, they're going to be on public land, on Forest Service land. That's these purple roads and trails here. See if I toggle it on, off and on, you can see them showing and not showing. Now this layer is important to click on, to query, to get the more information, because you see we list open and closed dates for these trails. Every state and every area is going to be a little bit different. In Montana, we have a lot of seasonal closures of roads. Typically, they will open up on a certain date in the spring. It's typically, there's some that open in like April, there's some that open in May, and some that open in June. And that is typically to protect like calving areas and fawning areas, wintering areas, so that when those elk and deer are at kind of their most vulnerable point of the year, there's not a bunch of motorized vehicles going in there and bumping them around when they're having their calves and their fawns. Similarly, a lot of these roads get closed in the fall. Some will get closed right before archery season opens. Some will get closed right before rifle season opens. Some will get closed like this past Monday, a bunch of them closed because our rifle season closed on Sunday. Then they shut down those roads for kind of wintering areas to, again, give those animals kind of a sanctuary area. I've been caught before, especially in the spring, where I was going to go out bear hunting to an area and drove up to the trailhead and the gates closed because I didn't realize that, hey, this doesn't open until May 16th. And I was there at the end of April. So do your due diligence, click on those roads to see a couple of things, see when the open and close dates are, but also see what type of vehicle is allowed here. Some of these, like this trail here, is a dirt bike trail. You can hike it, ride a bike, take a horse on it, or ride a dirt bike, but it's not wide enough for a four-wheeler side-by-side passenger car. If I click on this road here, overland, that's going to be like your passenger car. Maybe not necessarily a car, but like a four-wheel drive vehicle. High clearance 4x4 side-by-side. That's all allowable on that road there. Anything roads, trails, and rec I'm forgetting about?
I'd just like to touch on those last two layers you don't have turned on.
Yes.
We often hear about these ones in customer service. Both the roadless areas and then that forest visitors maps. Like he was saying earlier with how layers affect the imagery and will hide things on the map. These are ones that get turned on by accident quite often and people won't be able to see the map or it doesn't look quite right. If you ever get a map that doesn't look how it's supposed to, just jump back into your layers and start turning things off. Eventually you'll figure out which one that's affecting the map. That forest visitors map for sure turns it back into like an old school paper map, even though you're set to satellite imagery. Super common one that we hear about.
Yep, we hear that quite a bit. Again, that forest visitor one, it's a neat one that shows some information that's not on our regular base map. Just remember that you have it turned on. You're not going to be able to see satellite imagery with that turned on. So just turn it off when you're done with it. All right. Our last collection we're going to talk about today is our trees, crops, and cover. We'll try to go through this a little bit quickly. We're coming up on an hour here already. Some of the layers that I turn on here are the timber cuts. That is going to show you areas of logging or thinning or timber harvest on national forest land. Okay, so earlier I mentioned there are a few states where we have a state-specific layer showing timber harvest activity on non-federal lands, on not Forest Service land, so state land, county land, etc. This is a nationwide layer showing timber harvest on national forest land. Okay, so that's one I almost always have turned on. You know, a lot of people know that's a great area to scout for if you're a grouse hunter, those recently logged areas. If you're a deer or an elk hunter, that logging comes through, opens up the canopy, they get fresh green grass and fresh new growth coming in there. So timber cuts, big one. Another one's the historic wildfire layer. So this is going to be, you know, we talked about active wildfires earlier. Once a fire is put out, eventually it will make its way into this historic wildfire layer. You can see this was a fire north of town here from October. So that's in the historic layer right now. Again, if I click on that area, it will tell me this was the Big Knife fire, tell us when it started, how many acres were burned, and it gives me that burned area. As a burned area gets older, or, you know, the fire was farther back this year, it's red. A 2021 layer, or excuse me, a 2021 fire is orange. The color kind of almost fades as it gets further and further in the past. So it'll go from kind of a red to an orange to a yellow to this almost tan color. And if I want to know more about this layer, I can click on details. And this tells me fire data goes back 12 years. So similar to timber cuts, both burned areas, great spots to look for morel mushrooms in the spring. Great spot to, you know, look for elk in the fall, because that's going to be where some of the best green grass and those forbs and stuff come up in the wake of those fires. So again, this is a layer I'll turn on when I'm scouting. I often turn it off when I'm done though, just because I don't need that extra coloration obscuring the map. We came out with this last year, I believe it was, our crop data and our tree species data. We'll go through that real quickly. You can turn on this US crop distribution layer. And if I zoom in on some agricultural areas here, as I hover my mouse over these areas, it's going to tell me what was planted where. On your phone, you're not able to hover because there's no cursor. You do have to tap on the map, and that will pull up a menu. If I scroll down, it'll tell me alfalfa and how many acres. Now, this is data from last year. So this is 2022 crop data. We update this every year. It's like late February, early March. We get the data from our source. And of course, it's going to be from the previous fall. And you might say, well, that does me no good. I'm hunting this fall, not last fall. If you have an idea of what the crop rotation in your area is, you can have a pretty good guess of what is planted there this year. Here in Montana, you know, hay and alfalfa, 2022, pretty good chance in 2023 it's going to be hay and alfalfa again. That's not like a yearly rotation. I'll typically have that for multiple years at a time. Where Connor and I grew up in the Midwest, corn and soybeans, most of the time that's a 1-to-1 rotation with some exceptions. But if it was soybeans last year, so if I'm looking on the map now, I'm looking at all those soybean fields, pretty good chance it's going to be corn this year. We have 19 different crops. So you can take a look and you can turn on just the ones you want. You can turn off the ones you don't. Everything from potatoes, peas, rice, millet, wheat, hay, corn, soybeans. Super cool layer. I used it a lot when I was scouting for, you know, for pheasant hunting, seeing where those cornfields were. Use it for all kinds of different stuff, to be honest. But again, that's one that I typically turn on when I need it, turn off when I don't. Similarly, our trees species, we have a bunch of different layers for those. I'm going to move my map over to Minnesota, where I'm originally from and where I know we have a little bit more of a variety of tree species than we do in Western Montana. Here I can turn on, if I just want to see where deciduous trees are and coniferous trees are, I turn on that layer and I can see these brownish tan areas are coniferous. The red ones are deciduous. That's all I care about. If I want to know specifically what tree species is where, I'm going to turn on my deciduous and my coniferous. And as I zoom in, as that starts loading up, I can see a lot of aspen birch in this area. There's some elm ash cottonwood. large tamarack. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can kind of see these are all made up of little pixels, those little squares. Each one of those pixels is a 30 by 30 meter box. And what we show is the dominant tree species in that area. Is this just a solid mass of aspen birch? No, there are other species there. There's going to be some pines and some balsam mixed in there. There might be some oaks mixed in. It's showing the dominant species. That's what's most common in those areas. For you, grouse hunters, woodcock hunters, we have this young aspen forest. That's going to show you aspens that are 15 years old or less. So you can turn that one on if you'd like. Acorn producing oaks, not much in this area, but if you're a deer hunter, deer love acorns. So this is going to show you oak trees that are capable of producing acorns. There's no way to know for sure if the tree has a bumper crop of acorns on any given year. It's showing you areas where the oaks are mature enough that they could possibly, some oaks are on, it's like every other year, every so many years, they have a bigger crop. But it'll at least give you a spot to get started. And finally, our wetlands layer. If I zoom in here, it's going to tell me there are a couple different options. You can have a woody wetland layer and an herbaceous. You see most of this in this area is woody wetland, meaning, this is a big tamarack swamp here. If it's herbaceous, you're thinking more cattails, more swamp grass, things like that. Anything in there I missed?
No, pretty good there.
Awesome. We talked about querying the map. One thing I do want to touch on is being able to pull up weather information. Now, this is something we get a lot of questions on as well. There are a number of different ways you can pull up weather information on the map. If you're on your phone or your tablet, just tapping on the map will bring up a menu like this again. If I click the weather tab, that's going to give me the weather for the weather station that is nearest to that area. Okay, we have tens of thousands, I believe, weather stations, more than that, hundreds of thousands.
Endless.
A lot of weather stations we pull data from throughout the country. So this is just going to ping the nearest one to that location. Gives me the current conditions, temperature, wind. I use the sunrise and sunset data more than anything else, just so I know when the legal shooting times are. If I keep scrolling down, I can even get moonrise and moonset. I can get an extended forecast. So tomorrow it's going to be 30 for a high, 18 for a low. If I click on it, it's going to give me a little bit more information here on what to expect for precipitation, sunrise, sunset. If I keep scrolling down, just get another visualization of it. I can go by the hour, get the hourly forecast, and I can even get the moon phases. For some people, they want to know when it's going to be overhead and underfoot. I've never really paid attention to that too much for deer hunting, but there's folks that swear by it. So if that's you, we've got you covered there. And again, you can see, for the month, the moon phase, a lot of guys, I think about this with elk hunting in September. You might say, hey, I'm already planning my vacation for next September, and I don't want to hunt during the full moon because the elk are going to be able to see all night and they might be rutting all night. So the 15th through the 21st, I don't want to plan my vacation there. I may go a week later and hunt when the moon's going to be darker and hope that there's more daytime activity there. So you can click through all of that weather information. I'm going to stop sharing my web map here. I'm going to go back to my tablet so that we can talk about offline maps. One moment to pull that up. All right, here we are. So I'm back on my tablet. I'm looking at my map. One of the questions we get a lot, Connor, you probably hear this more days than not, is I don't hunt where there's cell service. How can I use the app if I don't have cell service? We've got you covered. If I go down along the bottom of my screen, I don't know if you can see that on your end, it might be cut off, but along the bottom of your map, you've got kind of a toolbar there. If I tap the button that says offline maps, I'm going to get a menu that pulls up. Yours may not have anything in it like mine does. but I'm going to click this button that says new map. And this is where I can save an area for use for when I don't have cell service. You see right now, I have a red box on my map. As I zoom out, you can kind of see that a little bit better. Whatever is within this box is what's going to be saved for offline use. You've got a few different options for resolution. Right now, if I pull this up, mine says low, medium, and high. You may have more options on yours. We recently kind of released an update that has more resolution options. For right now, we're just going to stick with these three. And we're going to stick with the medium resolution. That's what I use 95% of the time, is a medium resolution map. You can see it's going to give me about a 20 to 25 mile wide box. The dimensions here are going to vary a little bit based on your device, based on kind of the dimensions of your screen. Okay. If I go to low, you can see I can get a pretty big map. If I go to high, it's much, much smaller. That's why I use the medium, because I get a lot bigger area than the high resolution. And the imagery resolution is still pretty good. It's still going to be very close to the high resolution. I've never had it where, it cost me an animal, or it cost me, it caused me to get lost because I didn't have high resolution. When I'm hunting in northern Minnesota, I'm in this very small area. We have our set tree stands. I know I'm not going to be traveling. Then I'll use the high resolution. But besides that, I pretty much stick to the mediums. So once I get my map situated where I want, where am I going? Let's say we go right here. I can name the map, and I recommend doing this because right now I have something like 100 maps saved on my phone. And if they all just had the standard date and time listed there for the name, I don't know where those are. So I will give them names, whether it's, sometimes I'll just name them all Eastern Montana. I was recently out in Eastern Montana mule deer hunting. At least I know where they are. Sometimes it'll be for a specific waterway. Sometimes it'll be a specific area. Whatever makes sense to you. There's no real wrong way to do it besides not naming it at all. Right now, I'm just going to name this November Test. And I'm going to hit the save button. That's going to start downloading to my device so that when I go out in the field, all the information, the layers, the imagery, the topography, that's all saved to my device so that when I'm out there, if I'm in this wilderness area, I've never actually been there myself. I suspect there's probably not great cell service. I still have all that information. I'm able to mark waypoints. I'm able to track myself. I'm able to see my location. That's an important thing to note. Your device, your phone or tablet, has a GPS receiver built into it. So it's not pinging your location based on cell towers. It's contacting the satellites, the GPS satellites orbiting the Earth, just like a handheld GPS does. So it's able to locate you even when you don't have service. So even if you didn't have a map saved, you could still see your dot on the map. It would just be like a blank or a fuzzy map. That's why you save that offline map so that you can see the imagery and the layers. Any waypoints you mark when you're out of service, any tracks you lay, which we'll get into that here in a moment, those are all saved. Those will all be available to you whether you're offline or not. So it really functions, as long as you have that map saved beforehand, it really functions almost identically to how it does when you have service. There's just a few features, like we mentioned, some of those imagery options, the 3D map, a couple things like that are not available offline just yet. Hopefully in the future, we'll be able to make that a reality. But for right now, you do lose a couple of minor features, but you're still able to get out and use 95% of the app when you're offline. Yep. Couple other things to note in here. You see, these are all of my saved maps that I've got saved on this test account. You see some of them have green check marks next to them. One does not. That map with the arrow pointing down, that means that map is not downloaded to this device currently. So if I click on that, it's going to zoom me to that map. I can click on any of these names, and it's going to bring me there. And you can see on this one, the box has a red and white almost like a candy cane or barber pole stripe on it. That means it's not downloaded on this device. So if I go out into this area, I won't have this map available to me. If I want to use it, I tap that down arrow and it's going to start downloading for me. I'll know it's ready to go when it's got the green check mark. So you can save maps and then offload them later. I just did this because I had a whole bunch of maps saved for Eastern Montana for my mule deer hunt. I harvested a mule deer. Yes, I'm bragging a little bit. I'm done hunting there for the year. I'm not going to go back until next fall. I offloaded those maps. What does that look like? If I go down to this one that says tobacco roots, I tap those 3 dots and I hit remove from device. That is going to remove that downloaded data from this device, but it's going to keep that boundary. So that next year, when I go out to the tobacco roots or on my personal device to Eastern Montana, I want to save those maps again. I don't have to go through the whole, what we just did of save a new map and set the boundary. I can just tap that download button and it will download it for me. Another thing you might notice here, some of these say update available. What that means is if I go to this Northwest Montana one, something in that box has changed or has been updated since I last saved the map. That's most commonly going to be private land ownership information. Maybe we got new imagery. Maybe some trails have changed. Something's changed there, and it's not reflected on the data that I have downloaded to the device, so it needs to be updated. Couple ways you can update. I can just tap that green check mark. That's going to start that update process. If I go to the map below it, tap those 3 dots, I can hit update there as well. So this is something we hear about fairly commonly as well from people is, hey, it says update available, but I'm not able to update it before I go hunting. I'm not going to be able to use the map. You can still use these maps if it says update available. It's just something in that area is going to be out of date. Usually it's not super critical. We recommend updating them when you can, but if you're heading out and you're like, oh man, I didn't update them this week, don't worry about it. You're still probably going to be fine. You don't want to go months or years without updating them. Do it when you think about it. Do it when you've got good Wi-Fi, when you got your phone sitting there and you're watching TV or doing some work around the house. Hit those updates, let it run through. You'll be good to go. But don't let it cause you any undue stress or anything if it says update available. Anything on offline maps I'm forgetting?
Pretty much all good there. One nice thing too, if you do have a bunch of offline maps saved, you've got the 3 dots to the right of every individual map. But up at the very top of the menu, there'll also be those 3 dots. And if you click that, there is an update all option. So if you've got 10, 15 maps that all need updated, you can go through and just click that once, and then that's going to run down through that entire list and update them all. I do that during hunting season, probably once every couple weeks.
Yep.
Just set it and forget it and leave it sit on my desk until they're all done. Then I can move on knowing that they're ready to go.
Yep, that's a good point. Last thing to talk about with offline maps is if you're in an area where there's not good cell service, which is a lot of areas we hunt, right? One consideration is your battery life. The 2 biggest drains on your battery typically are going to be your screen and if your phone is searching for signal. Now, the best way to extend your battery life when you're out in the field is to put your phone into airplane mode. That is going to stop your phone from trying to connect to the cell tower. So whether you have no service or whether it's kind of intermittent service, I put my phone into airplane mode. That's going to extend your battery life by quite a bit, like a lot. So that your phone's just not always trying to ping, right? That'll put the app into offline mode. That'll still allow you to see your location, mark waypoints, see all the information on there, but it's not going to be, sending and receiving text messages and calls and things like that. I get to a spot where I'm going to eat lunch. I'm at the top of a mountain. I might have service. I turn it off airplane mode. I check my messages. I do what I need to do. I flip it back into airplane mode. That's my recommendation most of the time when you're in an area with no service or limited service. Go into airplane mode. That'll ensure proper functionality of your offline maps and extend your battery life quite a bit.
Another good one is to try and keep your phone warm. Having it out in the cold is going to zap that battery down pretty low. So keep it in like an inside pocket. Try not to pull it out too much if you don't need it. And you can get quite a few days out of a battery without any kind of extra chargers.
I do always carry an external power bank. You know, they're pretty ubiquitous. You can find them at like gas station checkout lines and stuff now. I've got a handful of different ones I've acquired throughout the years. They all seem pretty good. Got one from OtterBox, one from Mophie. I've got a few different brands. You know, some are bigger than others, depending on how much of a charge you need. So I got a real small one that's a little bit smaller than my phone that gives me basically one full charge. That's what I carry most of the time because I'm typically not doing, you know, extended days-long backpacking trips. So that's another thing to keep in mind, especially if you have other devices like a satellite communicator or rechargeable headlamp. Toss one of those in your pack as well. All right, moving along to our tools. Along the bottom of my screen, I tap that tools button. I pull up this menu. The most common map tool that folks use is waypoints. There's a number of different ways to mark a waypoint. In the map tools menu here, you see where it says add waypoint. If I tap that, you see a waypoint was placed basically in the center of my screen. It's going to be orange. It's going to have an X. It's not going to have a name. If I want to change where that is, let me zoom in here. If I want to change where that waypoint is, if that's not on the spot I want it, all I have to do, I'm just tapping on the map. So of course, the closer I zoom in, the more accurate I can be. So let's say that's the spot I want it. Again, always recommend you name your waypoints, know what they are. If you mark a waypoint and you don't provide any other information, months down the road, if you're anything like me, you're not going to remember what you were marking there. I went through a while back and deleted all of my waypoints that didn't have any specific information on them. I had a bunch of orange X's with no notes, no name, and they were made in 2018. 5 years later, I have no idea what I was marking there. But if I go in and I say this was a scrape, I'm going to change the icon. So if I tap there, I can change this to a scrape icon. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of different icons, everything from saddle, sheep, pheasant, elk shed, blood, 4x4. Use whatever is applicable to your situation. I've named it. I can change the color. Now that's one of the ways people organize their waypoints, especially once you have dozens, hundreds, thousands of waypoints. Things can start to get a little messy. So I can change the color of this. I'm going to make it blue. If I want to add a photo, like if this was a scrape, I will go in with my phone and take a picture of that scrape sometimes and add it to the photos there. I can make notes and say scrape popped up October 15th. Whatever makes sense for me.
I'm a big fan of the notes. I definitely go crazy in there, but future years when I get to look back at that, just a couple simple notes on waypoints makes you remember everything that was going on in that spot and why you actually wanted to save it.
Yeah, this is really a situation where the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. The more information you put in, the more useful it's going to be to you. If you do nothing, if you just mark a waypoint, you don't change the icon, you don't put any notes, you don't change the name, it's not totally useless to you. It's just not as useful as it could be. I mentioned earlier changing the color of the waypoints. There's a couple of reasons you might want to do that. Personally, I hunt pretty much everything the state of Montana will allow me to hunt. I hunt upland birds, I hunt elk, deer, bear, pronghorn, turkeys, waterfowl. I change the color depending on what species that waypoint is for. So my deer spots are that's what I hunt the most, I would say. That is the kind of the default red or orange coloration. My bear spots are blue because I like the alliteration. That's basically where it ends because none of the other colors alliterate correctly. Is that a word? Let's pretend it is. So, yeah. My waterfowl ones are green. My pronghorn are purple. Hey, that's alliteration. My elk ones are brown. Okay, whatever makes sense to you. That way, when I look at the map, I can see these are bear spots, these are duck spots, these are, grouse spots, what have you. Some people do that by year. And they'll put 2023, they're all yellow. 2022, they were all black. 2021, they were all purple. Whatever makes sense to you. I will also mark spots that I want to check out. I make them all red. So if it's a spot that I haven't been to or a spot that I need to go scout, I'll make all red. And if it's a spot like, let's say, hey, check this area for pheasants. And I walk through it and there's a bunch of pheasants, I'll change that to yellow. That's my upland color. And I'll put marks in there like, hey, flush 5 roosters, something like that. If there's nothing there, sometimes I will change it to black so that I know, hey, I didn't move any birds here. This doesn't look like very good habitat. Don't come back here. If I don't move any birds, but I still think there might be birds there at some point, I'll just leave it red so that I know, hey, come back and check this in a couple weeks. Maybe it'll be different, something like that. Another way that you can mark a waypoint, if I move the map back to my location here, when you're out in the field, you can tap this button that says mark my location. You can see a waypoint was placed on my dot. That's what I do most of the time when I'm out hunting. When I park the truck, I hit mark my location, then I will tap on the waypoint. It pulls up this menu. I'll hit the edit button. I can go in, I'll change the icon to a truck. I might change the name. I'm not going to do it right now, just in the interest of time. If I see a scrape, hit mark my location. If I'm putting up a tree stand, mark my location. You get the idea. That's what I do most of the time when I'm out in the field, if I just want to mark the spot where I'm standing. Another thing that I didn't really do all that often until you talked about doing it quite a bit is if I just press the map and hold my finger there, I think it's 2 seconds.
Yep.
If I hold the map, you see the waypoint showed up right where I was tapping my finger. So that's another way you can mark it and get it right on the spot that you want. Again, change the name, change the color, do all that good stuff. I'm not going to right now in the interest of time. So that's what you might call like a long press to mark a waypoint. And finally, if I tap on the map, you can see I have that green circle there where I tapped. I have this menu here that gives me the private land information at the bottom. I can hit add waypoint. I can add a waypoint that way as well. Waypoint stuff. What am I forgetting? I know. Some cool other tools we have on your waypoints are the wind direction and the radius. We're going to talk about radius first. We had somebody write in and said, hey, I want to be able to mark, I think they said like a 500-foot safety zone around a dwelling. So a lot of states have setback rules or safety zones around like an occupied dwelling. They'll say you can't discharge a firearm within so many feet. I think the person who wrote in said 500 feet from an occupied dwelling. So let me say, we're in the middle of town here, but let's just pretend I'm going to put a waypoint on that spot. I'm going to go into waypoint radius, and this is going to be yards, but let's just say I want to set it at 200 yards around an occupied dwelling. I'll hit apply. And now as I zoom out, you see I have that circle showing a 200-yard radius around that waypoint. So if I'm hunting an area, I can put that on the house or something, and I know, hey, that's an area where I can't discharge a firearm. Another reason people use this is on a tree stand. If I'm archery hunting, for example, I may go in here and I know that my range, I'm not shooting a deer, let's say beyond 40 yards. Let's just say that's my personal limit. I hit apply. Then I can know, hey, what area am I covering from this tree stand location? I can see that inner circle is going to be half of the radius that you have set, so 20 yards in this instant, and then it goes out to 40 yards. I've done that with a lot of my tree stands to mark, 40 yards or 50 yards or whatever your comfortable range is. People have put, if you're hiking into an area kind of out west, think big landscape stuff, where people will put a waypoint on every trailhead around an area. Say it's a wilderness area where there's no motorized, it's hiking only. Put a waypoint on every trailhead. And some people say, man, I figure most people aren't going to hike more than a mile from a trailhead. They'll set the radius to a mile, and they've got this big area with all these trailheads around it. And then in the center, there's no radius circle. So they know that's more than a mile from every trailhead. Some people will do that and say, that's, where I want to go elk hunting or something like that, or I just want to get away from people. So I'm gonna head to that area. A lot of different reasons to use the radius tool. The other cool waypoint tool is the wind direction. So if I place another waypoint here and save it, you see that first tool says wind direction. If I tap on that, I have two different options. I can have it show the current wind. So if I apply that, I can see no wind at that location. If I go back in, I tap on the wind direction again, I can have it set to an optimal wind. Now I can set, this is cool for two things that immediately come to mind are tree stands and duck blinds. If this is a tree stand, it's not because it's in the middle of a soccer field, but if it was, and I only want to hunt it on north winds, I'm going to select north, northwest, northeast, and apply. Now that will tell me, there might be a very light northeast wind here. It says 0, maybe it's kind of a 1 to 2 mile an hour to 0 kind of changing wind. It'll be highlighted green. If it was coming out of the south, it would be red. If it was coming out of the east or the west, it would be yellow because it's like a marginal wind. So that's an easy way to tell at a glance. If you have a bunch of tree stands marked, you can see all the green ones and say, man, those are the ones that are my options for this evening's sit. All the red ones, I'm not even going to think about hunting there. So another cool tool there for waypoints.
One thing with that wind on waypoint as well, we often hear that people think it's either incorrect or it's flipped compared to what they're seeing in like just the weather portion of the app itself. That's determining for that exact location. Whereas if you're looking at like the weather icon in the upper right-hand corner of your app, that's grabbing the nearest weather station to wherever you're at. So those two may not align with each other and they might be different, even if you are relatively close to that spot, since it's not using just exactly that wind, it's more trying to model it off of the actual terrain.
Yeah, it does take into effect the terrain and things like that. So it tries to predict what it's going to be, if you're on a ridge line or down in a coulee or something like that. And another question we get, it'll say, for example, if it says a 5 mile an hour west wind, that's a wind out of the west, so blowing from west to east. That's a question we get sometimes as well. And once you mark a bunch of waypoints and put the wind on there, I can click into the wind calendar, and now I can see all of my waypoints that I have them set for. Some of them have not loaded up here, but that will tell you what the wind is doing at all of your different waypoints at a glance. So you can see, easily, hey, which ones of my stands or which blinds are good and which are bad right now. A couple other tools quickly. The area shape tool is one that I think is super underutilized. Here I have, I clicked area shape there. I have this crosshair in the center of my screen. If I tap this drop point button, it's going to drop a point, move the map, drop another point, move the map. You get the idea. So this would be a way you could measure the acreage of a given area. Say you've got a food plot, for example, and you highlight that food plot with the area shape tool. Now I know the acreage, so I know how much fertilizer I need to buy, how much seed I need to buy, things like that. You can highlight the area. Say you want to fence something off for some reason. You can get the perimeter there so you know how big around that is. You can change the color of this just like you can with waypoints. So a lot of people will use this for, they have different types of food plots. Say they've got a brassica plot in one area, they've got winter wheat planted somewhere else, they've got turnips, whatever. And they'll make them all different colors so they can see at a glance what is planted where. Same thing with controlled burns. A lot of people use these and they'll have, let's say they have a big property and they burn a third of it every year. So it's kind of 3 different zones, and they'll have this year all the burns were purple, and next year all the burns are green, and then they're all red. You can kind of keep track of those that way. A lot of different cool uses for the area shape tool. We are going to bypass the line distance right now since we're almost already at an hour and a half and I am losing my voice. We're going to go to the tracker. Lower right-hand corner, I'm going to tap tracker. It's going to pull up this menu. This is how you can see where you've traveled as you're walking or driving. If I hit the start button, you see my blue dot turns red. And if I were moving around, you would see the dot moving and you would see a breadcrumb trail laid down everywhere that I walked or drove. This is another thing I do a lot of times when I'm hunting, especially if I'm hunting a new area. I'll mark a waypoint where the truck is or where the ATV or whatever. I'll hit that tracker. As I hike around all day, I can see everywhere I went. So this is useful for a couple of reasons. One is safety. I can see where I went. I know how to get back out, get back to the house, get back to the truck. I've done this for tree stands where I'll mark the route to walk into a tree stand so that in the dark, I can just pull out my phone and follow that in there. I could also send this to somebody. So I'm just going to stop this right now because I'm not moving. Don't need it running anymore. But I can send that track to Connor, for example. If we're going deer hunting and I've got all the stands set up and he's never been there, I'll send him the waypoint where the tree stand is, and I'll send him the track to walk into the stand so he knows, hey, follow this track, because if you deviate from it, you might end up in a swamp or you might walk through a bedding area accidentally, something like that. Since I wasn't able to save that track because I didn't go anywhere, I'll show you what it looks like to share a waypoint or a track or an area shape tool. It's all the same process. So any of our markups you can share. I just tapped on the waypoint. You want to share a track, tap on the track. Okay, you get it. I'm going to hit this share button, hit share again, and then it's going to give you this warning saying if you share this waypoint or track or whatever markup, the person who receives it is not able to edit it. It's view only. It's like when you share a Google Doc with somebody and you don't grant them the permission to edit it. They can see it, but they can't change it. So if I'm sharing it with Connor, if I hit share here, it's going to look a little weird because this is a tablet, right? You're going to have your options there to email it. I can share it with kind of any app where you can message. Most commonly, people will text message this. This is tablets. That's not an option there. I'm going to close out of that. But I could text message this to Connor. He gets notification on his phone, you know, that I want to share the waypoint with him. He taps on that link. It opens up onX and places that waypoint on his map so he has access to that information. Since it's my waypoint, he can't edit it. He can't share it with anybody else. If I no longer want him to have that, I can pull that permission from him as well. Okay, so when you share something, you own it. You control who has access to it, which is pretty cool.
Cool thing with that share function too is if you send that to somebody who doesn't have onX on their phone, they'll still be able to get it. It's just going to prompt them to download the app and create an account. Start them on a free trial. They'll be able to see it all the same as you are during that trial and be able to still access that info.
Yep, that's super cool. So, you know, again, use your imagination. I've used this to send tree stands to people. I've used this, you know, one time I killed an elk and had buddies coming down to help pack it out. I sent them where my truck was parked. And I said, hey, I'll haul a load out to the truck. I'll meet you guys there and then we'll hike in. I got out to the truck. There they were. Dropped off my quarter. We hiked in and hauled the rest of it out. You could share a track with somebody and say, hey, you know, I got an elk down, follow this track in to get to me. You know, again, possibilities are endless there. Whew. Anything on tracker I'm forgetting about? Trim track, that's one thing.
Yeah.
I more often than not forget to turn my tracker off when I get back to the truck. So I'll be driving down the road and I'll pull up my phone and say, oh crap, I've been tracking this whole time. I'll hit stop track, I'll hit save. If you've done that, you can go in later and edit that track. You can shorten it back up. So I don't need it going down the interstate back to Missoula from my hunting area. I just want it to end where the truck was. I can tap on that track. I don't have an example saved on this account, unfortunately, but I can tap on that track. One of the options will say trim track. That allows me to trim off either end of that track. So most people will want to trim off the end of it, but you could start at the beginning. You can trim it down to where you want it, hit save. That'll delete the portion you don't want there. If you're going to do that, make sure you've got it where you want it, because once you trim it, we can't undo that. If you delete like a waypoint or something like that accidentally and you want it back, let us know. Our email's help@onxmaps.com. We can restore waypoints, or if you delete a whole track, but a trimmed portion, we can't restore the portion that you trimmed off there. So make sure you've got it set where you want.
Little caveat in there too about restoring content. If you made a waypoint while you're out in the woods offline and delete it while you're still out in the woods offline, we won't be able to recover that. It has to be able to connect back to the internet, so all of that data is on our side. That way it has that backup.
Yeah, yeah, it has to sync up for us to be able to restore it. Okay, last thing I want to touch on today is the search function. So on my tablet in the upper right-hand corner, it looks like a magnifying glass. If I tap on that, if I can get my finger to go correctly, there we go. So you can search for, you can do a couple different types of searches, I should say here. By default, location you see is selected here. So that would be if I was going to search for, let's say, Glacier National Park. Once I type that in, I've got all these different options here to select from. I'm going to click the top one, Glacier National Park. The map brings me there. It's taking a little bit of time to load up because this tablet is slow. But if I zoom out, you can see I'm in Glacier National Park. Other things you can search for, you could search for a town name, you can search by county, you could search for lakes, mountain peaks, all kinds of stuff like that. You can also search for a GPS coordinates. So this is a question we get a lot of times, hey, I have some coordinates from somebody else. How can I mark a waypoint from those coordinates? All you need to do is type in those coordinates here or copy and paste them if they're coming from another application or a text message or something. You need to, we recommend doing that in decimal format. That's what works best with the search. So then your first number is going to be a positive number. Your second number is going to be a negative number. So let's say I go 45.1234. However many decimals you have, you'll type that first one in. Your second one has to be negative because we're in the Western Hemisphere. If it's a positive number, it's going to put you in the Eastern Hemisphere in Europe or Asia somewhere. Conversely, if your first number is negative, that's going to be Southern Hemisphere. So I'm going to go negative 100.1234, just for an example here. I'm going to hit search. I'm going to hit search. This tablet is not so good. Oh, I see the problem. I hit the wrong button there where I didn't have a negative. Jack, you think you work for the company, you would get that right sometime. There we go. I'm out of practice here. We haven't done one of these in about 6 weeks. There we go. I hit search. Boom, it's going to bring me to South Dakota. That's where that coordinate is. Then I can just hit add waypoint. It puts a waypoint at those coordinates. All right. Hopefully that's our only major snafu for the day. I can go to private land and search as well. So this would be if I'm searching for a landowner. So let me first get back to Montana. Private land, I'm going to type in Smith. You can see there's a lot of Smiths nearby. It's a pretty common last name. So if I'm looking for a Brad Smith, for example, the more information you can give the search function, the better your results are going to be. So be as specific as you can. You can also see the search is going to prioritize the results that are closest to your location. So Idaho is the closest. If I'm looking for a Brad Smith in Florida, move the map to Florida, and it's going to prioritize those results first. I'm getting a notification that my battery is getting low. So we're going to power through this because we're over an hour and a half already. So there's the search function. Pretty handy tool there if you need it. Anything I'm forgetting there?
No, pretty much good.
Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to ask Eli to post the giveaway link in the chat. So get Eli, it is in the question sheet at the top there. And then I'm going to go to some of our questions that people sent in.
while he's pulling that up too, if you guys do have questions, definitely feel free to reach out to our team. It's just help@onxmaps.com. We respond to all emails within a business day. So if you send us something tonight, some point tomorrow before 5 o'clock, you're going to get a reply. And anything you've got, feel free to ask us and we'll be happy to help.
Yeah. Obviously I'm biased, but I think our customer support team is second to none. I've recently had to deal with some customer support with other stuff, healthcare stuff and whatever. And it's amazing to me how long it takes some people to get back to you. We're going to do it, that same business day or the next business day. So some questions here. Wind on a waypoint, we covered that. Tap on the waypoint. Your first option there, one of your first options is going to be to set the wind direction there. You can always go back and edit that later. If you don't know what the best wind or optimal wind for a location is, you can always just set it to the current wind. I do that for a lot of like my glassing knobs, my glassing locations, because sometimes the wind isn't super important there, especially if I'm glassing a mile away. I'll just have it set to the current wind so I know what it's looking like up there. Sharing waypoints, had a question on that. We just touched on it, but we'll go over it one more time. Tap on a waypoint, it'll bring up that card that brings up the information about it. One of your options at the bottom there will say things like edit, delete, share, hit share. Most commonly, people will text message it. You can email it, you can share it. I've done it, we use Slack for our messaging program here at the office. I've used that. You can share them via Facebook, Instagram, pretty much anywhere where you can copy and paste text, you can share a waypoint there.
One to touch base on from earlier in the class as well. That recent imagery and leaf off imagery, those are both elite only options. So if you're on a single state or a 2-state premium plan, you unfortunately won't have access to those. If you do want to check them out though, send us an email. We'll get you 7 days of an elite trial. So that way you can take a look at them and see if it's something you want to upgrade for.
All right, so to kind of wrap up here, if you don't currently have an onX membership and you would like to get one, we do have a discount available to you. It's 30% off. If you go to our website, use the promo code app101, that'll save you 30% off your first year. That is only good for your first year, and it is only good on our website. It will not work in the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. That'll charge you full price. They don't take promo codes there. Has to be at onxmaps.com. If you have any issues using that promo code, email help@onxmaps.com. We'll be happy to get that set up for you. A couple other ways to learn more information. We have a lot of tutorials on our website in our help center. Our YouTube channel, we're constantly adding more information. That's also where all of these master classes live. So any previous classes, we've been doing these, this next March will be 2 years. We've been doing these master classes. So we have, 101s, tutorials like this. We have kind of scouting specific classes. We have species specific classes, all kinds of different topics on there. We did like a backcountry meat care class this summer. We've done scouting for ducks, scouting for pheasants, scouting for elk, things like that. So check out our YouTube channel. And then our upcoming classes, we are kind of in a slow period right now, with December, with the holidays coming up, we do take a little bit of a break from some of our classes. We do typically once or twice a month office hours. Those are in the middle of the day. That's just a straight Q&A type class. We have one of those coming up next week. We have the fellows from Hush coming on later on this month, do a little bit of a storytelling and Q&A. And then after the first of the year, we're really going to get rolling with our application season classes. We're going to talk about some changes to Wyoming made some changes this year. We're going to cover out how some of the different draws work. We do that with our friends over at Hunt and Fool. So stay tuned for those. We'll get into some turkey stuff and everything as the year rolls along. So check out that website there. You can also Google onX Hunt Masterclasses. We have a landing page there that'll show you all of those upcoming classes. You can get signed up there. Anything I'm forgetting?
I think we're good.
I am at 7% on battery life, so we made it. All right, I want to thank everybody for joining us again tonight. If we weren't able to get to your question, I apologize. We had a couple hundred that were sent in beforehand. Hopefully we answered most of them. If you still have lingering questions, again, shoot us an email, help@onxmaps.com. We're happy to help you there, and we hope to see you on the next one.